beginning of the end for you.
To the sky!
Bestowed upon you the power of the sun.
A mighty sword!
Strike while the iron's hot.
For Camelot! For Avalon!
Let the heavens rain! I am Ragnarok!
It's Saturday, SMITE fans, and that means the SMITE Pro League.
You okay there, Dave?
No, I'm not. I'm still reeling from Delney's solo lane performance in the SEC this morning. It's Saturday, SMITE fans, and that means the SMITE Pro League has returned. It is just oh my God, it is just after 1 p.m. Eastern time here, and that is the Heroes Hour. The Hour of Heroes, and Heroes Hour is also a game that you get for free this month with Prime Gaming, of course, our sponsor here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. Free games every single month, free in-game content every single month, and so much more. Make sure to get the absolute most out of your Prime membership, including all of the great things that come along with Prime Gaming. So thanks again to Prime Gaming for being with us here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. My name is Dolson. I'm a bit tongue-tied this morning. J-Mac joins me on the desk to start things off. J-Mac, it's you and I right now.
It is.
It is you and I. We are kicking it.
It's us against the world.
So there are no rules, right? If it's just us,
Right.
chaos reigns supreme in the studio.
Easy peasy.
I'm going to figure out some fun that we can get into. But we're hanging out here for our first set of the day. And, of course, in Phase 3, everything feels a bit more impactful. And that is because the SMITE World Championship just around the corner. We are, literally, if you count, obviously the days get a little muddled, but the 15th of January is 3 months away, and that we will be Championship Sunday. We'll be grand finals of the SMITE World Championship live in Arlington, Texas, 3 months from today. Near unbelievable, but we've got a lot of SMITE to get through before then. Of course, Phase 3, that culminates in the Phase 3 playoffs. The top 4 SPL teams from the Phase 3 playoffs go on to the World's quarterfinals. But chances for the SEC and the SOC teams to qualify, that'll be early December to mid-December, and then early January is really where it all begins, and we'll qualify our final 4 teams into the SWC right around then. So for our SPL teams this weekend, very, very important in separating themselves out in the standings just a little bit. And we've got some great matchups to get us there. The Valhalla Valkyries, J-Mac, did not look good yesterday up against the Oni Warriors. After a great week last week, got a big win. Not a great showing up against the white-hot Oni Warriors. And the Valks will have to go up against the Jade Dragons. So a tough 1-2 matchup for the Valhalla Valkyries to start off their weekend. And then Titans versus Camelot Kings. That should separate out the standings a little bit. How about that second matchup of the day?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be the matchup that everybody's going to keep their eyes on. Tartarus Titans have been a little bit hot and cold as of the last couple of weeks of play.
Yep.
They haven't really been able to get those huge wins for themselves, but their losses have also still been fairly close. So I think there's a lot of expectations for the Titans moving forward. And here, Camelot Kings, their only loss being up against the Jade Dragons. That's why we see this awkward kind of standings at the very top. It's a triangle of Oni Warriors beat the Dragons, who beat the Kings, who beat the Warriors, and that's where all the kind of the nonsensical head-to-head and plus-minus all comes in. That's why the standings looks the way that it does. So I think all eyes are definitely going to be on that second set for sure.
And important for, as they should be. So if you're going into this set, Jade Dragons up against the Valhalla Valkyries, again, the Valks have improved their game to the point where, like yesterday against the Oni Warriors, I think we kind of forget about game number 2. But the Valhalla Valkyries in game number 1, stabilized, 15 minutes, we're still in the game. Up against the Jade Dragons, though, stabilizing in the early game has been the downfall of all of the teams that have run into them. Now, lost their win streak previously, right? And so the Jade Dragons bouncing back now. Conversation to be had about good, bad times to lose, things like that, of course. But the Jade Dragons, J-Mac, still maybe the best early game team here in the league.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we always talk about when it comes to the league and when it comes to teams having to face off against the Jade Dragons is in seasons of past, it used to be, can you survive the first 15 to 20 minutes against the Jade Dragons? If yes, then you usually had a pretty good shot going to the late game because that was where the Jade Dragons shine. It's still a little bit of that, but the Jade Dragons have definitely kind of shored up that disparity between the first 20 to the last 20 kind of a style of play. And a lot of that, I think, is attributed to Final-K over in the solo lane. He's been able to really make a nice pivot in his role, really kind of picking up just about whatever the team needs. You know, we always talk about the ideas of role players who go out there and they just do their job. Final-K does that, but he does that at a better level than a lot of the other players out there, a lot of the other solo laners in the league. He'll play whatever's meta if that's what's needed, but he's also not afraid to just be like, hey, you know what's really fun is, you know, I haven't played this god in a while, and he'll just jump it out. So we see a King Arthur come out, and all of a sudden now everybody's got to keep out and keep eyes on a King Arthur. When Lancelot is kind of fluctuating in and out of popularity, he'll be like, okay, well, Lancelot looks like pretty fun to run in this one, so I'm going to play that there. He's always playing whatever his team will need for him, but he's also playing it to a level that other solo laners still haven't quite matched up to yet.
To your point, J-Mac, 6 games, in the last 6 games for Final-K, 6 different god picks. Artio, Guan Yu, Set, Kukulkan, Cthulhu, Lancelot. So 6 different picks in the last 6 for Final-K. So it's flexibility, and then completely agreed. It's flexibility that then is super well placed on all of these different gods, different play styles, but all of it looks really good for Final-K. And so for a lot of what the Dragons have been doing, having that constant fallback, especially when you're talking about like role swaps and things like that, when you have a few players between Mike and Fino and PandaCat to really lean on and be consistent when jungle and mid and all those picks are going crazy, so important for a team to have something stable. And Final-K has been just that. Final-K standing by now for the pregame interview going up against the Valhalla Valkyries.
So we went 1-1. We lost to the Warriors, and I mean, it was kind of a close set for sure. And I think that the Warriors look pretty strong this week, but I do think that we kind of let it like slip through our hands a little bit. Maybe got a little too comfortable trying out stuff. Still happy with the 1-1, and you know it's going to be a long split, so a lot of it's just about learning and getting ready for Worlds, which is obviously the most important thing. I think the meta is kind of shifting like pretty fast with all the changes that hi-rez has been making and like the balance team and everything. So I don't know if I'm looking specifically towards like a one change, but more like, you know, just trying stuff out, making sure we're staying like ahead of the meta, and you know, making sure that we're not like caught by like surprise with any like crazy picks or anything. Valks are looking really strong. They're not the Valks that, you know, from phase 1, split 1 or whatever. They've gotten a lot better. You can tell that like scrimming against professional teams helps so much, and I think there's a lot of like Challenger Cup talent that's kind of untapped, and I think they're a good example of that. So they're looking the strongest they ever have, and I think it'll be a good matchup against them. Specifically like Benny Q and his crazy mid picks. You know, we got the brother versus brother matchup already, so maybe Daniel will have some insight into Benny's mind since he grew up with him or whatever, but no, honestly, yeah, Benny in the mid lane, he kind of has like a crazy play style, but their whole team is just super strong. I think Aqua's been playing really well lately as well, specifically for my matchup. I need to look out for that, and he's been piloting the Mulan pretty well, so maybe a ban coming that way.
So Final-K maybe considering a Mulan ban up against Aquarius. Apparently that has looked really, really good. You know, a couple things that the Jade, well, really Final-K, but the Jade Dragons keep their eyes on going into this matchup. Of course, the flexibility of Benny Q, very, very important. Benny Q's played Junqui, a bunch of Naja out of mid, Set the more assassin games in mid than actual mages over the last 6 games for Benny Q. But also talks a bit there about the flexibility of Aquarius. And I think that's worth looking at as well, because it has been Mulan, a couple games of Cerberus, Guan Yu. And so Aquarius also, and when you consider needing a pillar, a cornerstone of a team that can just play consistently, won't ever really lose lane, doesn't necessarily dominate his lane, but Aquarius always feels like a stable side of the map. When a team is trying to figure out their game plan, it's so important to have a player like Aquarius on your team who's going to be rock solid, going to be consistent, then you know what you're getting.
And that's kind of the important thing about having a player like Aquarius is, as you said, he's not really a player that's ever going to necessarily lose you a game. He's also not always going to be a solo laner that will win you a game. He's going to make sure that he is out there doing what he needs to do to stabilize that solo lane, get into the team fights. He knows exactly what he needs to do. And if you kind of look at Aquarius' evolution just over this last year, over his time from the Winter Dogs into the Valkyries, he played a lot of very standard stuff. He wasn't really doing a whole lot of experimenting initially. You know, when Cthulhu, Ardeo, those kinds of things are meta, he's playing the Cthulhu, the Ardeo. He's sticking a lot more to the meta. But his transformation from kind of phase 1 into phase 2, you see a couple of extra little picks come through. Now moving from phase 2 into phase 3, this is where we're starting to see a little bit more from him. We're seeing things like Chang'e solo, which nobody was ever playing Chang'e except for like Zeros in the mid lane in Season 8, kind of at the tail end there. So
That's a throwback.
now we're seeing Aquarius kind of come out of his shell a little bit more, bringing out picks like the Mulan. That one was specifically to kind of counter up against the clear that Hades has, because sometimes I like to think of Mulan as almost like a warrior mage, especially if you get a little bit of damage into her kit. Spear Thrust does a ton of damage to the wave. It's great poke. It's great sustain. And it's really just a way to kind of match that pressure that gods like Hades and Guan Yu have out there.
Yep.
So I wouldn't be surprised if Mulan makes its way back out, mostly just depending on what Final K and the rest of the Dragons end up drafting.
Yeah, Jade Dragons potentially considering a Mulan ban, according to FineOK. Look, the Valhalla Valkyries, it's been a year-long project, and we knew that. We knew it was going to be a roller coaster of a journey for this team. But everyone in the league, you know, it's easy for us to sit up here and say, well, they're getting better, we promise. You know, it's getting there to try to build up this team. And it really feels like teams in the SPL starting to agree. You know, I think I've always said that the Valk's not at a point where I'm favoring them in many of their matchups. This one, no exception. I still favor the Jade Dragons, but the Valkyries have improved to a any given day type of team. The Valkyries, on a good day, might be able to find themselves a win up against the Jade Dragons. But I think, J-Mac, a lot of this is going to come down to the first 15 minutes of this game. It's something the Valks were able to do in Game 1 against the Warriors yesterday. But it's a whole different animal when you're going up against the Jade Dragons. And I think when we get into picks and bans and we see what Scream and Pagon are playing, that'll be a pretty good indicator of how the Valkyries need to play. Do you agree? Do you think the first half of these games, I mean, it's the only point of the game you play every single time, right? Stabilizing against the Jade Dragons, maybe the biggest task ahead of the Valks today.
Yeah, 100%. I think the biggest task for the Valkyries is to get through those first 15 minutes, because for the Valkyries, that's where they've obviously played the most. They haven't really gotten to get the 25, 30, 35-minute kind of games. They're typically in there for the first 15 to 20, and then maybe it goes well and they get a little bit of extra time at the end, but as history's indicated, it usually hasn't gone as well there. So the Valkyries have worked so much on those first 15 minutes, they're able to go even with teams like the Kings. They're able to go even with teams like the Oni Warriors. And the Jade Dragons might be the hardest team because they're the ones who want to run it down more so than any other team in the league.
Well, we'll see now if the Jade Dragons just hammer pressure in their draft phase, if the Valhalla Valkyries try to counterpunch that, because you know, it's not only the Jade Dragons. I mean, plenty of teams here in the SPL like to play aggressive, like to play in your face. Titans do it from time to time. Bolts haven't been super successful recently, but the Bolts in the past have played that style of game through Lasbra. And there's so much theorizing around how do you beat a team that is just crushing you with pressure? Do you try to stall out till later in the game? Do you try to counter out the pressure? I think that's still an identity that the Valhalla Valkyries attempting to sort of feel out. Priority 1, deal with the pressure. Priority 2 for the Valks has got to be get that farm under control, because that's really what ran away from them in Game 2 up against the Oni Warriors. They were getting kills, but they were so far behind in invades and farms and neutral objectives.
I shall bear your burden.
Just didn't look great. So Pele ends up being the pick here for Scream. Fantastic start for the Jade Dragons. Pressure, J-Mac, as we figured. I'm going to levy a question, though. Atlas for Gamma.
Yeah.
Built full damage full damage plus Thebes, and then the starter item, of course, was the Sentinel's Embrace, but it was Sentinels, Thebes, full damage from that point on. Are you bought into full damage Atlas, or would you like to see a bit more tankiness?
I just like to see a little bit more tankiness. If you're playing him in something like mid or solo, fine, get a little bit of tankiness, get some damage out there. But as the support, and especially if your solo laner's not building nearly as tanky, your jungler's more of an assassin, you need to have a little bit of extra defense into the kit. Maybe a little bit of extra CDR in there as well. I mean, Atlas's cooldowns are fairly long between his kinetic charge, between his gravity pull back in. And he offers so much utility as a support. You know, he already does a pretty good amount of damage. You build full tank on him, I mean, you can still put out pretty immense damage between that ultimate dropping in the middle of a fight, getting that charge onto multiple people there, even if you can at least throw your Astrolabe out and get a few pulse shots out there. So I think having a little bit in there, something like a Spear of the Magus or a Divine Ruin, very easy to do so, especially against a comp like this. I would actually prefer maybe a second item Divine Ruin coming out of Gamma, but I think you do need to have a little bit of extra tankiness, especially if Aquarius isn't going to go with this more full tank style. If he's going to go a very bruiser heavy, you need somebody to be that front line for your team.
Yeah, right, especially with the way the rest of this draft could potentially go. I mean, if it's only Aquarius that is built full-on tank with the way the Dragons comp is already forming, might be a difficult game for Gamma if the build ends up rounding out that way. We'll keep our eyes on the build. In-game, though, we can only speculate so much. We got to stick with what we absolutely know, and it's that Pele, Set, and Hades loves to get in there. The last time we saw Set for the Jade Dragons was Pregame playing Set, a 5-1-11 game up against the Tartarus Titans, and so that looked good. Double Assassin plus Hades, J-Mac. What kind of vibes are you getting in the first 3 here for the Jade Dragons?
Just with this, I mean, this is pressure in the jungle. Pele's one of the better early junglers that you can get. She moves across the map very fast, so she's able to get from buff to buff or from buff to lane, even from lane to lane very quickly compared to a lot of the other assassins. Sure, she can't match a semi-global rotation of something like a Ratatoskr or a Thor, but I do like that the Valkyries have been able to kind of counter that by having a Wheelish who also gets a lot of extra movement speed on top of Suku. So the Valkyries have at least answered the mobility aspect of the jungle. But then you get Set whenever he kind of gets his first couple of items online. He does immense amounts of damage. You drop Skewer in the middle of a fight, especially with that Kingslayer. A lot of sustain, a lot of damage. And we know just from this Hades alone, Hades is never going to lose a lane. That's the one thing that Hades has had throughout the entire course of his history, is he will never lose lane. In fact, more often than not, Hades is winning the lane. You know, he's getting the early clears, he's getting early poke, usually getting that first tower down ahead of anybody else. But this is a very sustain-heavy composition already out of the Dragons. Pele, when she drops under Threshold, and if she buys a Soul Eater, lots of lifesteal that comes from that. Set with Kingslayer, gets a lot of sustain from that ultimate. Hades inherently gets it. So I'm worried that the Dragons are putting too much into sustain, but they're trying to counteract that by having massive amounts of burst damage to go with it.
Well then, J-Mac, maybe Medusa becomes a very good pick here for the Valhalla Valkyries. Anti-heal now built into that acid spray, and you know, so it's an option. And you talked about maybe wanting to see something like a Divine Ruin on Atlas, Brawler's Beat Stick potentially for a Wheelix later on in the game. And so there are options for the Valhalla Valkyries to get some of that anti-heal a bit later on. And so the trend continues now for FineOK, specifically on this Hades. It'll now be 7 different picks in the last 7 games for FineOK. You're like, I would assume that he had gotten Hades, but it's so heavily banned out against the Jade Dragons. It's been a minute since Fino has been able to play this pick. So we assume we're still looking for support and ADC. Chernobog could be an option. Now I want to talk about the Valkyries composition a little bit while the Jade Dragons consider their picks. Morrigan, always very dynamic. In your eyes, any obvious transformations come to mind here in the first 9 or so picks? Or do you think opportunities kind of abound for BennyQ depending on the moment?
Just based off the picks that we have so far, the best option for Benny is going to be this Pele at almost all parts of the game. Early game, you're just going to get your decent damage. You have a nice CC immune ultimate for escape in case you need that. If this Hades makes a rotation early, you need something to be able to get out of the Pillar of Agony. Outside of that, the Wheelish is okay. Maybe if you grab it early, try and pull Hades out of his dash. E-set if you want to go for some objective play, but because this is a support E-set, unlikely to get the burst damage out there. So I think for the majority of this game, BennyQ is probably going to be looking over towards this Pele. But I think also going back to talking about the Jade Dragons in this composition, I'm not 100% sold that this is going to be Hades going over to FineOK. We have seen Hades go into the mid lane a little bit. Yeah. FineOK has some performance on the set. Obviously, Pregame has it there as well. I think in this matchup, I might almost kind of like the set to go over to FineOK because you can build him a little bit more bruiser-esque, get things like a Glad Shield in there to give him a little bit of extra tankiness, build him kind of this mixed style of build, and it allows you to have kind of a pseudo second frontliner to be able to get that dive in there. He already has a lot of base damage into his kit. Give this Hades over to Pregame because when you're building solo Hades, you're building him just like a mage anyways. You maybe sprinkle in like a Breastplate of Valor, a Mantle of Discord, or a Spirit Robe, something like that in there to get like one defensive item. So if that's the style of play the Jade Dragons are going, and that's the style of build that is built for this Hades in this game, I wouldn't mind if Pregame actually took this pick over to the mid lane. It just makes it a little bit more dangerous because now you have to have a constant threat of the Wheelish potentially pulling you out of your dash. But getting a little bit of a more bruiser style set would be good. I think looking at the fact that it's going up against a tier in lane, almost now makes me kind of want to push the Hades back over to solo because he has a good matchup there. But I think either way, whether the set goes to Pregame or it goes to Final K, could work out for the Dragons.
A little data to support both. I mentioned Pregame set looked really, really good against the Titans in the last time that we saw the Dragons play this set, literally in their last game. A couple games before that, Final K did play set over in the solo lane. That one was against the Oni Warriors in the 2-0 loss at a 2-2-5 performance. Or the 2-1 loss, rather, excuse me. Jade Dragon's able to get one in that setup against the Oni Warriors. And so composition's now set. We're sticking with set, I suppose. That was unintentional, but I'll take
always
the brownie
intend
points.
your puns.
I always intend my puns, that's right. So Pele set, Hades E set. God, so many sets in this one. Chernabog finishes off the draft. How dynamic do you think this Chernabog could be for PandaCat? And ends up being maybe the most standard pick in the Jade Dragons composition here, but that global presence, an option that the Dragons may choose to lean on. Do you think that is an extra sprinkle of dynamic into this composition, or you think the Valkyries may be prepped to deal with it?
I think this Chernabog does give a lot of flexibility to the Dragons to kind of pull plays that we're used to. I mean, we talk about how the Dragons like to try and get these early kills in lanes. They try and like to make early rotations, find these early picks, and Chernabog is a great god to do that. You hit level 5, you can dash your way all the way across the map. Now all of a sudden this 1v1 you were taking is a 2v1, or this 2v1 gank you had is now a 3v1 to kind of fight out there. So I really like the Chernabog for the Dragons specifically because it really does match their play style. It matches the kind of early game aggression that they like to have. And up against this composition, though, for the opposite side, we were talking about Benny Q and his transformation targets in the last earlier on, how kind of I thought only the Pele was really a good option for him. I think now with this Chernabog locked in, it does give another good option to Benny. He can now go over and split push, maybe deal with some minions over another lane, transform into the Chernabog, fly over to a team fight very easily if need be. So a lot of options for Benny Q and a lot of chances for the Valkyries to be able to fight back.
Name of the game for the Valhalla Valkyries: survive early, keep the Jade Dragons on the back foot, and see if you can close things out here in game number 1. Jade Dragons versus Valhalla Valkyries. Game number 1, it is Dolson and J-Mac on the call for our first set of the day here on SPL Saturday. And J-Mac, it is Hades over in the solo lane for Final K. Pregame will be playing set mid. And so all lands where we initially thought definitely potential for a bit of flexibility later on. And I think you were hinting to it a bit. I think you didn't mind the Hades into the tier matchup, and maybe that's what makes the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the tier going over there, having a way to kind of deal with that fearless early on, stop a lot of the primary clear that the tier has. I mean, once level 2 hits, that's where tier really shines in the wave clear department. Same thing with the Hades. He can do it at level 1, but once he hits level 2, has access to that fear, hits the whole wave, hits it with his third ability, and then all of a sudden now the entire wave is essentially dead, and you get to get free poke up against somebody like a tier. But once you have tier level 2, you already have your stance switch for free no matter what. Fearless the wave together, now you can double power cleave it, and you clear it almost just as fast. So I actually do like the Hades in that matchup specifically to try and slow down Aquarius' early game, make this tier take a little bit longer there. And I do like that this Tainted Steel has kind of become the meta pickup for Hades, even if there isn't a whole lot of sustain on the opposite side. In his direct matchup, the Tainted Steel will work. You get good stats whenever you upgrade it to the Tainted Breastplate later on. And overall, just kind of dealing with the kind of the hidden lifesteal that comes from a lot of the gods, kind of the hidden sustain that comes from, it just makes it a really nice little startup item for him.
Polar Bear Mike hangs out in lane, gives a bit of extra experience over to PandaCat, and so a small moment, but level 2 reached for Panda. Little experience lead over on that side. And actually, J-Mac, we didn't get to talk about it. What other set did you and I cast together recently? It's all blended.
Is the SCC one
we
on
casted
Thursday,
the final
last
set.
one.
That's right, the final set on the SEC. And we get to cast this one together as well. And we did get to reference it then. I just think it's very funny because we talked about the 15 Redditors that are losing their mind that you and I finally get to cast together. Because a while ago, people were talking about caster pairings, things like that. And a handful had voted for J-Mac and I as like their favorite combo, and we had never casted together. And so those 15 people, and there's no reason, we do the same thing. And so there's 15 or so people out there feeling very vindicated and supported and very happy that you and I get to pair up once again here. And really, as we talked about at the end of that pick and ban phase, I think Valhalla Valkyries and their ability to get proactive early, but also slow down the Jade Dragons is going to be super important. Obviously, at level 5, that's when a lot of potential spikes up. But I think this mid lane matchup going to be super interesting. Obviously, the brother v brother matchup, as we've talked about, Pregame versus BennyQ. But a set up against a Morrigan. I mean, you talk about mobility and playmaking potential out of the mid lane there. This is kind of the exact style of matchup I think we've written up for Pregame versus BennyQ in the past.
Yeah, I mean, these two have a very similar style of play, even if with different god pools in that regard. BennyQ, known from his time on the Winter Dogs, where he would play just about whatever he wanted, brought that kind of style of play into the SPL as well. And Pregame followed suit, almost maybe to even more of an extreme when he hit the SPL. You know, Pregame was still kind of playing some stranger stuff in the SCC. Then he comes over to the SPL, and all of a sudden we're seeing Tsukiyomi mid, we're seeing Susanoo mid, we were seeing things like the Sun Wukong and the Kabrakan from BennyQ. Those are usually kind of like little one-offs. You know, we saw those one time for a very specific matchup where Pregame was just kind of pulling those gods out anytime that he wanted to. A couple of them were matchup dependency, like a Robin into a Poseidon there. But I think the innovativeness of both of these mid laners is what really has led their teams to be able to make some more kind of interesting compositions throughout the way. I mean, it's not, you can't really tell in this regard because it's, you know, two assassins on one side versus a Morrigan and a Wheelish, which could be a double assassin there. But when we were kind of really in the heat of those two's kind of prime of doing that style of play, you really got to see some different comps. You really got to see some head scratches coming from these guys. And they were performing well on it. They were showing that, you know, it's not just a fluke. This isn't just me making one little thing.
First ult of the game from Fine-OK, and first ultimate out by Aquarius. Scream and rotated over to the right side of the map, and so necessary for Aquarius to disengage there. You mentioned it, Fine-OK feeling just fine over here on right. And Scream, you know, I like it. You know, even though it doesn't end up in the kill, getting proactive the moment level 5 is hit does lead you to believe that the Jade Dragons want to push down the gas pedal just a little bit further. And Kirmi being able to match that pace. Kirmi been such a dynamic player, an important player, a spearhead for this Valhalla Valkyries team, and such a student of the game as well. Now playing the Awilix. Early pressure needed, unfortunately right now, falling onto Kirmi. And that'll cede mid-camp control over to the Pele and over to Pregame as well. Full Jotun's Wrath completed for Pregame, who was farmed up nicely. So decent little power spike here in the first 5 minutes.
Maybe a little surprised that it wasn't a Transcendence right out the gate for Pregame.
Yeah.
He's going to get a ton of farm in the mid lane. Could still go it as a second item, but Jotun's means that he gets more procs of Kingslayer very early on, means he gets to use his Skewer multiple times during the wave. Once for full clear, once kind of for poke out there, and he'll still be able to get a decent bit of clear in that regard. He can drop the Sandstorm whenever the wave kind of stacks up onto him, so he can get a little bit of extra damage in that regard. Going up against something like a Morrigan, though, is always tricky no matter what you are, unless you are playing something like in a Muzen Cobb that has the bees to be able to drop the honey on, kind of break that stealth very easily. Going to be difficult for Pregame to try and find these early picks unless the stealth is down for BennyQ. So I like the idea of going for the Jotuns to give him more opportunities to get that early poke to kind of force this Morrigan back to base a little bit more often. That's
right. BennyQ will head on back, grab the Doom Orb. And you know, in metas of past, getting Doom Orb first had us thinking, okay, we're talking about constant out-of-lane rotations and the extra speed that gets added in there, the movement speed. BennyQ is going to be all over the map. Now feels more like just for team fights, things like that. The extra add bit of movement speed just makes it so much more effective. Potentially some rotations out, but not always the guarantee. If Wowie shows his face, Scream is in a fantastic position way behind the Medusa, but there is no help here in this lane. This is just an assassin versus a hunter. But wait, Panda Cat's here as well. Who am I kidding? That's what happens when you got a Chernobog on your team. The sudden engage, Scream, and Panda Cat, they combine for first blood.
And that's how I was talking about it in the picks and bans, is whenever you draft a god like a Chernobog, once you see somebody running at you in one of the lanes, you got to know that in the back of your mind, that Chernobog could be there at any moment. And that's what Panda Cat did. He goes back to base, he gets his Transcendence, he starts kind of pulling himself away from the fight, removes himself from the map for a moment, and that kind of gives Wowie that false sense of security. Okay, he's gone into the jungle, he's not going to do anything. But then Scream all of a sudden shows up into his lane, and at that point, Wowie's got to know, okay, well, I've got ultimate, I've got beads. Neither are really going to do too much to save me in this case, so he holds on to both of them, just knowing that Panda Cat's going to show up.
Return kill onto Mike would ease the pain a bit, and it's happened. Mike has been caught out. The Valhalla Valkyries even the score right on up. And On a moment's notice, you need Kirmi to show up. It's a blink in, a knock up, a gravity surge back in. Now an attempted red buff invade, an attempted, I'll do you one better, secured by the Valhalla Valkyries. So you drop first blood and then end up turning things around quite nicely with a kill onto Mike. So both junglers go 1 for 1 and a red buff invade. And so dropping a little bit of experience away from Pregame. Good turnaround from the Valks. That was what was missing a bit, J-Mac, against the Oni Warriors yesterday, was any type of answer back. Like, yes, we're getting kills, but what else? And so finding a way to remain proactive and steal some farm away from the Jade Dragons. A good early look for the Valkyries here in Game 1.
It's kind of good and bad news for the Dragons with the comp that the Valkyries have put together. We always talk about Wheelish, how she's come back in. Her ultimate got a buff to its cooldown, so you can use that thing so frequently. The problem always comes down to is finding a composition that usually works around the Wheelish. If you don't draft a whole lot of knockups in the composition, usually Kirmi would have to do the work himself. Good thing about Gamma and his god pool right now is that Atlas being a huge part of that. Free knockup that can easily come from a pull there, so that's an easy target for Kirmi to be able to grab there. Aquarius on tier with the Fearless also going to be able to push target up into the sky, so another person and another opportunity for Kirmi to grab. So for the Jade Dragons, not only do they have to play around the Jaguar that gets thrown out by Kirmi to deal with the knockup, they have to be wary of Gamma, they have to be wary of Aquarius. And unfortunately for Mike in that case, his only single tool that he has available to get away from that Wing Gust, was on cooldown. That's why he gets yanked back in. It's an easy pickup for the Valkyries in that case.
And so things stabilize now in the first 9 minutes of the game. And honestly, J-Mac, that is more than most of the teams in the league could hope for up against the Jade Dragons. But how about this? An early Gold Fury pull by the Dragons, and it is so low. Do they stick with it? When you have a circle of protection, why not? Valhalla Valkyries, they steal it away. It's a circle of protection and a kill on to Polar Bear Mike, and it is 18 damage from the Gamma Ray Burst. A double kill for Benny Q. The Valhalla Valkyries deserve their due credit. Pregame scurries away, but Gamma keeps the big plays going. What is this? A 3-for-1 trade and a Gold Fury steal. Valhalla Valkyries have stepped up right when they need it most.
That might be the second lowest damage that we have seen steal an objective besides Kepri Rising Dawn. We've seen Gamma Burst steal Furies before, but that's when you fire it and it's at least doing 100. 18 damage out secured, a circle of protection early. Gamma plays that perfectly, throws out the Astrolabe, uses the Gravity Well immediately afterwards, and that picks up one person and it kind of disrupts the second one. So it slows down the DPS on the Fury. Because of that, PBM had already used his ultimate, so he doesn't have it for the fight after. Panda Cat used it to try and get himself to disengage. Pregame pops the Kingslayer, and he's fighting as much as he can. He got a lot of damage off, and at least able to find one pick during that one. But the disruption by Gamma at that Gold Fury, so great by him in order to allow his team a little bit of extra time to kind of close that gap in.
I was waiting to see if we would pull the Pyromancer. Seems to be some name synergy here, J-Mac. And out. Oh, it's just too early. It's just too early for Mike. He overestimated how much damage that Circle Protection pop was going to do. And remember, even in a loss up against the Oni Warriors, Gamma looked fantastic. Now you're building full damage on an Atlas, and so there's a conversation to be had around that. But as far as playmaking, Gamma plus Atlas has been a fantastic match. And now 100% kill participation, a Gold Fury steal with 18 damage. And really a forgettable moment for Mike. You lose out on the confirm when you got a circle protection down by double-digit damage, low double-digit damage, and then you die right after it. And so the E-set hasn't quite hit its stride early on here just yet. And when we talk about the Valkyries getting into this game, being active in this game, I don't know if we gave them enough credit. We said survive the first 15 minutes. And the Valks have done one better. They have survived. Now the question is, I mean, if you really rewind, you know, it's a results-based question. The Dragons pulling that Gold Fury that early, certainly something to be looked at as well. Gave the Valkyries a chance to steal and win the fight, but the Valks giving very little chance. Mike maybe an opportunity to turn it around. Whoa, Panda Cat has gone in here. But the Valkyries have figured out their objectives in the last 24 hours. That is a free Pyromancer over to the Valks, extending their gold lead just shy of 2,000.
Just comes down to BennyQ from the mid lane kind of recognizing, okay, well, we haven't seen Pregame in a while, so he's probably gone back to base or may have gone over, pick up his red buff at the time. So really just recognizing the window of opportunities that they have in order to be able to grab a Pyromancer like that. I mean, they put 4 people on that side of the map. That amount of damage is going to guarantee that you get it, especially with the composition that the Valkyries have built around it. Aquarius, decent damage on the tier early on. Manticore Spike, while it doesn't give you a ton of damage on, still at least gives you a little bit of extra sustain in that regard to be able to get in there, get your CC out. You have a Wheelish who has built double flat pen, so Kirmi's going to do a lot of damage no matter what through. BennyQ, obviously, and then Gamma, who has gone for the Divine Ruin himself. So 2 forms of Divine Ruin coming through from BennyQ and Gamma. So Gamma's going to have that extra damage.
Nice.
But now for Gamma, this is kind of the question of where does he go for the rest of his build.
Right.
We've seen
this is the pivot point.
We've seen Staff of Mirrodin before. And I like Staff of Mirrodin. I think it's good. You get a lot of extra procs immediately with it. You drop the ultimate, and instantly you get the proc to give you that extra power. But if he goes anywhere beyond a second damage item, that's where it gets into kind of dangerous territory. Aquarius is definitely going much more Bruiser styles, going Manticore, Glad Shield, and then we'll go into very likely probably a Witchblade, and then most likely even either a Winged Blade or a Relic Dagger potentially to kind of round out his build early on. So Aquarius is going to have a lot of HP, not a whole lot of defenses to his name. So if there's things like kin size being built, which has kind of been the meta for a lot of hunters, anything like maybe Soul Reavers, which probably would only be able to come from Final K in this regard.
Look at Panda's build. You're talking about kin size. Yeah, we're talking about kin size, and that drew my eyes over to Panda Cat. Transcendence into Shadow Steel. We'll see what he ends up building after that. Pregame jumped on, is gone. BennyQ with another 3-1-2 now for BennyQ on the transformation into the Pele. You called it, J-Mac, and it's here. Kirmi not only doesn't die, but turns around the kill. What is happening? The Valhalla Valkyries arise from the ashes of their loss yesterday and are taking it to the Jade Dragons. A 3-kill swing. Low health bars, and I think that'll slow down the Oni Fury for now.
This just feels like such an awkward power curve for Panda Cat with his build. Transcendence, that's the meta. We all know how well Transcendence has been doing. The Shadow Steel, this early on, you're not really getting the benefits of its passive if that's what you're going for. You get decent power, decent attack speed, and some crit, but I don't know why Shadow Steel here compared to anything else. There's not a lot of sustain on the side of the Valkyries outside of Aquarius. Nobody's building any kind of lifesteal into their kit right now, so it's a very awkward curve as far as his power is concerned. Doesn't really come into too much play during that fight there. A lot of that comes down to PBM kind of getting poked out, Pregame getting picked off very early on, and the early transformation target out of BennyQ. This Pele is just going to do wonders for the Valkyries early on.
Yeah, you would think. And the Valhalla Valkyries pull and secure an Oni Fury. My goodness. This is surprising, to say the least. The Jade Dragons have been so consistent in the first 15 minutes of their game. Not here. After that Gold Fury steal plus a kill turnaround, the Dragons themselves now searching for a few answers while the Valhalla Valkyries maintain their pace. And BennyQ has really stepped up here in the first few minutes of this game. The transformations from the Morgans have hit. The ins and outs in those team fights so important. And BennyQ maintaining a 2-level lead over his brother on the other side of the map. Flat pen obviously feels good for Kirmi, as you've mentioned. Does so for BennyQ as well. I'm still holding my breath waiting for Gamma to head back and buy something else. Middle of the charts as far as gold goes, and that's pretty hefty. Almost 1.5K ahead of Polar Bear Mike specifically. And so you're talking about on-map gold advantage. The relics getting upgraded very, very early on for supports. It's going to feel really, really good here for the Valhalla Valkyries if they're able to continue fighting around Gamma. And if they found a pick here, if the Valhalla Valkyries, J-Mac, have found a pick for Gamma that's not getting heavily banned out, and then that Gamma's just feeling super comfortable on, I think raises some eyebrows in the next couple of matches here for the Valkyries, because Gamma looks like a totally different player here, win or lose, in the last couple of games this Atlas has been picked.
We've been seeing a lot of ban priority towards Gamma by teams. I mean, you look over at the Kings, you look over at the Warriors, really anybody who has played up against the Valkyries recently has recognized that Gamma stepped up in his God pool. Sure, he may not have the most abundant pool compared to some of the other supports out there, but the 3 to 4 picks that Gamma has been doing really well on are typically the ones that are getting banned away. His Kabrakan, the immediate one that comes to mind that he doesn't get as often as he used to. Ymir kind of shines its way up there every so often. But this Atlas is becoming a number 3, at least in my eyes, maybe even potentially his second, if not his best pick out there. So I'm surprised that so many teams are just allowing him to get this Atlas because it works so well on so many compositions. You get decent early wave clear. You get decent pressure as far as the team fights are concerned. If you can find one person with an actual pickup from the gravity well, that's a win. If you can find 2 people with the pull back, even if you don't get a hold on and then throw them to the rest of your team, that's still a win because all that repositioning that he has, the shred that he has with his ultimate up against objectives, make him such a worthwhile pick in just about any composition. And I'm glad that Gamma has been able to add him in there.
Pregame might be in trouble here. Beads taken away by Aquarius. Panda uses the ultimate aggressively yet again. This has bitten the Jade Dragons in the past. Not a full commit on a fight by either of these two teams. The Valks have loved fighting around that red buff here this game. That's where you've seen a lot of these fights break out, the Jade Dragons red buff specifically. But with no Fury, with no Pyromancer on the map, not too much to fight over, unless you're able to get a pick. Pregame has to use the ult, use the beads, and so maybe feeling like a worthwhile trade for the Valhalla Valkyries. And I think if you're zooming way out, we're talking about the conversations you have about the Valhalla Valkyries as a team. This is the type of game where our spotlight and maybe the goalposts for the Valkyries have changed, right? Because earlier on in the year, I think we're saying the Valhalla Valkyries, the fact that you're in this position after 18 minutes is a win. Now I think for the Valkyries, they have improved to the point where the expectation is we're going to convert this into an overall win. We're going to kill the Titan here in game number 1. So I think expectations have fairly shifted for the Valhalla Valkyries. So it is surprising that we've gotten here. The Valks have really taken it to the Dragons. But now closing it out, I think the Valkyries deserve their respect and feeling all right with the pacing of this game so far. Though on the flip side, J-Mac, the Dragons so good, yes, at playing and getting aggressive early, but also not a team to scoff at later on in the game either. Very good at slowing things down. But you got to draw your line somewhere. Hasn't been any of the towers, hasn't been the Pyromancer. Are you maybe hoping to see the Dragons get active around this next Fury?
I think they can easily get active around either Fire or Fury. It's a perfect opportunity to let Panda Cat split push in the left lane. That then forces the attention of somebody from the Valkyries to go answer to it, because Panda Cat can just do this. Go split push, go back to base, or while in the middle of a split push, use that ultimate to get back to Fire and help set up for the team.
Alrighty. Jade Dragons at a heavy deficit. Pull the Fire Giant at 19:45. Polar Bear Mike wants a redo with the Circle of Protection. Drops it off the FG, and the Jade Dragons get the Fire Giant. Nonetheless, Gamma, though, grabs the first kill. Fido K and Panda combine for the next, and now it's up to Benny Q after his transformation in the Hades to tilt the scales back. Scream will not finish the kill, and only 2 Fire Giant buffs remain, though Kirmi, J-Mac, he's on the hunt.
Yeah, Kirmi wants more,
No,
but won't find it inside of the jungle there. Jade Dragons kind of go for the coin toss play. I mean, this is the old rival 50-50 style that this team is so familiar with playing. Go for the objective no matter what. We're either going to get it or we're going to not. Kirmi has a lot of damage. He could probably just kill Panda Cat as soon as he gets out of that wall. Needs to jump over. A couple more autos should do it, but
so
never
awkward.
mind. He gets hit by 2 400-plus crits, and Kirmi's not going to be able to get that one. No, under the tower, out. But this is what at least the Jade Dragons are familiar with. They're so used to 50-50ing objectives. They've done it for the last 3 seasons of play these guys have done. The problem is they don't really have good secure. We mentioned that, yes, there's an E-set, but it's a Lono's Mask E-set that's being built up here, or in this case, at least a Protector's Mask. So you're losing out on a lot of your extra damage. You're building full tanks, so you don't have that damage out there. So you have to commit so much of their AoE abilities just to try and hopefully get the objective. They do so, but because they expend Final K's ultimate for the actual burn of the Fire Giant, because they use Circle Protection to try and get the Fire Giant at that point, Benny Q and Gamma are able to walk in. I think Aquarius does a really good job too, where he pushes 2 into the ring of fire around there to add a little bit of extra damage in that regard. Valhalla Valkyries make a great play around there, take it away from 3 essential players. Unfortunately, Panda Cat does still have it, but with only Panda and Final K having Fire Giant buff, this was most of the Jade Dragons finding their way to stem the bleeding and slow down the momentum the Valkyries have built.
Is it possible to Caster's Curse an entire game?
Yes.
Because right when I'm talking about how the Valks, you're in a great spot and expectations shifting for this team, we're expecting to see you, maybe my expectations were close things out, but at least leverage that, expand upon that gold lead. And since making that statement, lost to Fire Giant, granted strip away a few of those buffs, 3 kills for the Valhalla Valkyries, and then a clean Gold Fury pull by the Jade Dragons just now. Shrinks things up further. Pyromancer then pulled by the Valhalla Valkyries, but what it really feels like, J-Mac, although a hefty experience lead at just about 4,000 gold, meaning so much less and so much less disparate over the last couple of minutes. There's really one giant experience lead for the Valks, and it's in support. It's where a lot of it is. 2 levels in mid as well, where BennyQ has put together a great game, but the other players on the map for the Jade Dragons outside of mid and support are ahead of their counterparts. And doesn't it just feel ever so slightly like the winds have changed? That aggressive Fire Giant pull. Since then, it feels like the Valkyries have been on the back foot and answering the calls that the Jade Dragons are making.
They were able to grab a Pyromancer, which does end up helping out a little bit, lets them get out of base a little bit faster to make these early rotations through. But just the grouping by the Jade Dragons more than anything, it has put a bit of a threat over towards the Valkyries. Kirmi, who was able to find some kills during that fight, able to get some important power spikes up for himself. Titan's Bane now available to him, so he's going to have a lot of extra percent pen to deal with some of the, well, I say deal with the lone tanky target that's there, at least for PBM, but still a decent little bit of power in there. And if Kirmi didn't have to deal with the fact that it was a Chernobog, one of the more slippery hunters to kind of deal with in that 1v1, he should have been able to get that kill onto PandaCat, because the amount of auto attack cancels and hi-rez procs that he can get with this wheel, I mean, if you jump in immediately, get the auto after, that's a lot of enhanced damage, plus her passive comes through there for that first one out of combat. Then you get an auto into a Feather Step, auto after the Feather Step. If you get the knock up, there's another one there. If you can pull him in, there's another hi-rez proc there. By that point, any squishy character, and in this regard, pretty much everybody except for Final K or PBM, should die in that regard if their beads and Aegis are down at that point. But it's kind of the fault of the Valkyries' composition as we move a little bit further in. It becomes a little bit more pick-oriented, same thing with the Jade Dragon. So it almost feels like as we move towards these later Fire Giants, whichever team can find those first couple of picks in the fight, not necessarily win a whole team fight, but if you can catch one person out of position, if Aqua can find Scream or Pagon kind of slacking and force them back to base, if Kirmi can find a 1v1 up against Scream or Pagon, or vice versa even then, if Scream can find Kirmi or BennyQ all by themselves and find a pick, that's where the success of both of these team comps will come in around the objective.
Now, I mean, there's a conversation to be had about the types and the amounts of fights that WoWie has been in. But 1,300 damage at the 25-minute mark. You need more than that from your Medusa. When you compare it to what PandaCat's done at 10,000, 1,300 for WoWie, just not going to get it done for the rest of the game. Now, again, conversation to be had about PandaCat. You know, he's ulted into a lot of fights. WoWie hasn't had all these fights brought to his doorstep on a consistent basis. And so I think there are discussions to be had there. But if the Valkyries want to close this game out, you need that 1,300, lowest in the game at the moment. I guess, I'll be fair, tied with Mike for lowest in the game. That's got to skyrocket, especially with the state of the build right now with Kinsai's Odipo, Silver Branch, a really strong-looking build. And PandaCat, his build apparently paying off, as we already talked about the crit a little bit, Fail Not, Shadow Steel, and then what could be a Deathbringer to finalize the build for PandaCat, the Chernobog. I think I've just felt more confident in what I've seen from the Chernobog pick up to this point. So at 26 minutes, the Fire Giant will respawn. This is what you get, though, with the Chernobog. You allow PandaCat to hang out over on the left side of the map and ult in. BennyQ, I suppose, could do the same. Could transform into the Chernobog and ult in as well. But the X factor is Scream. And Scream has Blink, but Kirmi also here. The 2v2 that could change the face of the game. And though Pagon now slipping in behind some of the members of the Valhalla Valkyries, this is a tense moment where the death timer's long enough. Yeah, you don't want to make the fumble play. Now with the Fire Giant back up and respawning, and both smaller objectives are going to be around as well.
And we've hit that uh-oh point of the game, at least in regards of a couple of bad picks with the state of the map currently, at least in the Jade Dragon's favor. Could just end the game. It happened last week where we're approaching 23 minutes. Jade Dragons find 2 picks by a Gold Fury, and then that's game. And that was 23 minutes in at that point. Respawn timers are just long enough, and there was just enough damage for the Jade Dragons to be able to push down a Phoenix, find one more pick during a fight, and then go for the end call against the Titan. It's a little bit tougher to do with how much more even the game is right now, with how healthy everybody is, how far along in the builds that everybody is in the full regard.
Ooh.
But the Valkyries recognizing with how much time and priority the Dragons have put to the left-hand side, they've got 2 members there compared to just 1 for Benny. Could go for the Fire Giant. If they get this trade, that's worthwhile.
You gotta get it, though. You gotta get it now if you're the Valkyries. And the Valhalla Valkyries do get the FG. Scream ended up dying to the Phoenix as well. But Pagon's got something to say about the team fight on right. A double kill for the set already. And only 2 Fire Giant buffs remain. Pagon looking for a third. Aquarius gets the Fearless back. A triple kill for Pagon. The Jade Dragons, they don't need numbers. Hell, they might not even need the rest of their team. Panicat walking into the Titan room, and it's down to Gamma. J-Mac, you may be a chair 1, but your chair 2 brain flexed here. 1 team fight is the difference maker, and the Jade Dragons find it, and they will take game number 1 at a kill deficit.
And again, it would have been a worthwhile trade should it be Fire Giant traded for just Benny Q. In fact, it was even more worthwhile because it was Fire Giant for Benny, and then Scream also dies. So you get the 1-for-1 trade on the left side. The problem then is that there's not, again, on the side of the Valhalla Valkyries, there's not a lot of burst damage. There's not a lot of confirmed to do the fire. So you have to spend all of your abilities, every single one of your auto attacks to try and get this Fire Giant down. You put so much time and focus on the objective. Gamma used his ultimate, only fired it at the very end of the team fight when everybody was dead. Everybody's used their mobility to get into the Fire Giant and used all their abilities to kill it, that now when Final K jumps in and drops a Pillar of Agony in the middle of 3 or 4 people, you don't have a way to get out there. And oh, by the way, Pagon is still beating you across the head with this set, hasn't lost a single bit of HP. This is just a class case of the Dragons just recognizing their mistake to say, okay, well, we did send 2 people there, but the 2 people we did send there, at least one of them can rejoin us in the fight if necessary. Wasn't really necessary, by the way, because Pagon's just got more than enough damage to go out.
Yeah, there's got to be a difference in feelings for fans after a game like this. Jade Dragons fans, you know, you're not thrilled that you kind of stumbled in the early game the way you did, but now have shown a diversity of win conditions. We can lose early and still win late. If you're the Valkyries, you're thinking, hell, we've been even winning in a lot of early games this year. Now it's time to close some of those out. Unable to do so here in game number 1. Jade Dragons take game 1 against the Valhalla Valkyries. More SPL action in game number 2 right after this.
Water. Earth. Fire. Momo?
It's the Jade Dragons with a win, albeit a different style of win here in game number 1, where they're down a bit early. They turn things around, a couple aggressive Fire Giant calls, and the Dragons able to take things. And so you could say same old Dragons, but New Jersey Jade Dragons. And you at home can be a new whatever team Jersey fan. And remember, Worlds just around the corner. If you are attending Worlds or watching from home and you want to rep your team while they play on the main stage, hopefully they make it, because the man sitting next to me could knock one of them out of contention. But if nothing else, you'll be looking good, because Skulls has powered us here with our Jersey game, and it all looks fantastic. Valhalla Valkyries, a new look for their squad as well. And hopefully a new look here in game number 2. Shop.hirezstudios.com/SPL. And thanks again to Skulls for providing us our jerseys here for this phase in the SPL. They all look fantastic. Make sure you get your hands on some. Well, I've already hinted at it. It's still Dolson, I'm sorry, but Hurrywin joins me for game number 2 and the breakdown from game number 1. Happy to have you here with me, Hurry.
Happy to be here, as always.
The best second baseman of all time joins me. We're picking up right where we left off yesterday. That's a fantastic callback by me. I know you caught the back half of that game a little bit here. The Jade Dragons stumble a little bit early, right? The Valhalla Valkyries very proactive. The Gold Fury steal by Gamma early on makes the big difference. But the Jade Dragons, you know, they're not a team that shy away, right? Even at a deficit, they have a very aggressive Fire Giant call later on, and that's where this game, I think, really turns.
Yeah, we see that Fire Giant call later on, even though they were on the back foot, especially after their fumble a little bit earlier on with that Gold Fury, losing a lot of members of their team, kind of starting to lose their grip on the game. Then they had a little bit after that, as I'm sure we all watched, the little bit of a different take on dealing with the Fire Giant here.
Right.
They kind of just played their split, forced a 2v1 eventually, and got a pick, and then got a free Phoenix that way. Which is actually pretty interesting. We haven't seen a lot of plays like that actually for a long time in the SPL, but you can just see how tough it is for these teams to deal with this sort of play. Now, I do think the Valkyries had some options to kind of deal with this. They do have the Morgan, who can turn into one of the, the Chernobog, for example, and fly over to the Fire Giant. I think they had an opportunity to perhaps chase out Panda Cat and force out that ult a little bit earlier when they were pinching him. So they did have some options. Was ultimately a pretty hard situation to deal with. They did fall flat dealing with that situation, and it ultimately did cost them that game. It definitely feels pretty bad to lose that way, but they shouldn't be too sad. They fought back into that game pretty well. They looked good.
Yeah, they have something to build on going here. And BennyQ really had a fantastic first 20 or so minutes of game number 1 here. You know, it's when you get to the point where the Jade Dragons are the ones asking the questions is not where you want to be if you're the Valhalla Valkyries in this one, and it was just so hard to decide. I mean, if you're the Valks, because you still have, because it was Scream and Panda Cat over on the left, and yes, BennyQ could ult over to FG, but you'd still hope that the 4v3 for the Valhalla Valkyries would feel confident around the FG, but then you got a circle protection for Mike to deal with as far as objective secure goes. I agree. That's a game of chess that is just so hard to make calls on in the moment. Do the Valhalla Valkyries totally readjust their game plan? Do they totally redo their draft? Do the Jade Dragons draft more pressure? We'll find out in P's and D's. For game number 2, the Dragons would love to get out of here with a 2-0. The Valhalla Valkyries hoping to avoid a forgetful weekend after an 0-2 loss to the Oni Warriors yesterday. And, I imagine the Dragons a very hard team, Hurrywin, to pick and ban against, because such a flexible team in their play style, but also in their picks. They can play that style of game with so many different gods slotted into those roles.
So many of the meta picks now, Dolson, have come from the Dragons, I think.
Sure.
With this Pele, for example, being one of them, the Hades from Fine OK. They've defined sort of the meta everyone else is playing in right now. So unlike other teams where you're target banning maybe random picks that not everyone plays that they might be pretty adept at, the Dragons, when you're target banning them, you're also talking about the meta characters more often than not. And here we are again with maybe a new meta-defining pick. Panda Cat with also an interesting build last game on this Chernobog is going to be banned away by the Valkyries. They did not like having to deal with that split push. They've decided they're not ready to deal with it. I think that's probably a good adjustment for them. It does leave open the Nausea, which the Dragons are going to take away right away. And we've seen Scream and Pagon as well be very impactful on this pick, so no surprise to see them take away that pick.
Hurry, what's your take on because for a while it was Pregame Naja, but it was like jungle. It's not like they were just role swapping. They were playing the other role's gods, just in the other role. Do you read that as the Jade Dragons just having some fun, or do you think there's actual strategical evidence behind that type? Do you think that's like the Dragons testing their limits a bit?
I think it's a lot of things, but more than likely,
It's many things.
it's many things that are hard to describe. But I'm guessing that it just worked out in scrims, and in the back of everyone's mind, they're like, "This can't be good. This can't be good."
Let's
and they were
see.
just waiting for it to fall apart, so they could be like, "Yeah, I've told you so. Okay, never again."
Yeah, but it kept working in their SPL games. Are you so from a player's perspective, do you subscribe to it's better for the Jade Dragons to have lost like last week, lose now, rather than later on in the phase? Or from what you know of those guys, you played with them for a little while, do you think they're unconcerned with win streaks when they lose, things like that? Do you think any of them buy into that superstition?
I don't think they really buy into the superstition. It's definitely something that they themselves kind of like poke fun at now and then.
Yeah.
Ultimately, one loss is not gonna rattle them too much. They're gonna stay grounded for the most part. It is something that they think about a lot. They definitely don't take their losses lightly. I'd say they're probably happy to get it when they did. Speaking of losses, maybe a loss coming their way. They're letting Atlas through again, especially after stealing that Gold Fury last game.
Yeah, Micah, 18 damage.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Hurry Wind is
Only Gamma.
Only Gamma with the Gamma Ray Burst would steal away a Gold Fury with 18 damage and got a kill onto Mike. That was a low light for Mike for sure. Misses the E set confirm and then dies to Gamma after the fact. Even though it's gone 0-2 in the last 2 games for the Valkyries, Gamma has looked like an animal on this Atlas pick, and I do think you're kind of rolling the dice a bit the more often you're giving Gamma this pick. But the Dragons clearly feeling confident. Naja, Hades, and Ho Yi. So the core 3 now of the Jade Dragons. Suppose some flexibility between Naja and Hades. Do you like what the Dragons have gone for with their first 3 picks?
Yeah, I'm never unhappy to see the Dragons pick up Hades. Final K has looked nothing but fantastic on this character so far, even last game coming up pretty clutch with some pretty great plays. This Mulan, the Valkyries have actually showed they like this as a counter pick potentially into the Hades, and it did look pretty good for the way it was working last time. Just kind of the way the lane plays out. Mulan actually can have an advantage once she gets a couple items online, so I don't mind seeing the Valkyries go to that pick. I do think that's a pretty solid counter pick potentially into that Hades solo, and it probably will be going solo too. So that kind of rounds out the Valkyries' top 3 there with the Atlas, the Chiron, which we skipped over, and then the Mulan.
Yeah, sorry, Chiron. We just left you in the dust there a little bit.
He'll make you remember him. I've got a feeling this.
You
game.
think?
He looked so good in the King set the other day too.
It is true.
So I do think this pick's a little bit underrated, so happy to see that picked up as well.
Are you on like full ability-based Chiron, like you
Of
pop
course.
Centaurus and just shred targets? Is that the right way of doing it?
I played backline long enough to know that those hurt.
That's true. Well, now you get to play frontline and you get to learn in a totally different way. I guess a little different though. That really pops the backliners.
We see my own backline die. Too.
Right. How sad are you to? Well, I guess if
Less
you're
sad
in
than it's me.
Right, less sad than if it was you.
Right.
So you're not the my life's work as a support is to save my teammates. Are you saying that you're a KDA player, or is that what I'm getting?
I'm certainly not a KDA player, but if my teammates can't position, that's not on me.
Yeah, right. You can only help someone who wants to be helped. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's fair enough. Bastet, normally something that we would see for Scream on the opposite side. Have not seen Bastet at the same rate as we did early on here in Season 9. Bastet in the current meta. Set me some expectations.
I think the Bastet has looked okay at best.
You are whelmed.
Recently. The Dragons did ban away the Awilix, which I think is probably what Kirmi would have went towards if it was still open. He's definitely looked pretty proficient on that character. It's really been bringing a lot for the Valkyries in these early games, in these mid games, and even the late game sometimes, especially with that ult being on such a short cooldown and such a strong steroid. But it is going to be gone. They are going to go towards the Bastet. It does have Beats Force in its kit now with the ultimate that was changed not too long ago, and I think overall she's fine. It kind of just depends on the matchups you're looking for. On the other side, I'm looking at the Dragons comp. I see a Naja, which, it's probably a skill matchup between those two, and then the Ho Yi, who has no CC immunity in his kit, so getting beads off that character could feel quite impactful, especially when you have a character now like Bastet on your team that can pull them in for free when they're down.
Yep.
So probably a good pickup. We'll have to see how this Bastet performs, though. I
Right.
don't have the most confidence in it. You know, maybe if it was Scream, we'd be having a different conversation. But Kirby's no slouch on the Bastet ultimately.
We're feeling lukewarm.
Lukewarm.
With the potential for hot, but also the potential for cold, depending on how play on field looks.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. That is
You're a man
kind
after
of,
my own heart. We're sitting the fence. We're saying, you know what, it could be good. Because in reality it could. Because we've seen Bastet games just get absolutely unhinged, but also games where it's dealt with somewhat easily. Now, it doesn't make life easier for a Bastet when the carries have a lot of self-disengage, and that's what a Yu Huang has. Briefly, Ho Yi, I suppose you can take yourself out of those fights up in the air for just a second. And Horus has not been the most often picked support. I don't know the last time Mike has played the Horus either.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I can't remember.
Sorry,
last time
I'm taking your work. That's,
No, you're reading my mind is what you're doing, which is creepier, but...
Well, when we
gets
look
the
into
job
each
done.
other's eyes, I just feel that type of connection. You know
that
what I mean?
Poseidon pick is good, Dolson.
I was about to say the same thing.
Same wavelength here. Poseidon
But
pick,
you know,
fantastic.
I know I was going to say it, but tell me why the Poseidon is a really good pick.
I just think it's really strong into pretty much everything the Jade Dragons have so far, and especially this Horus, which was picked bottom 2, is probably hoping to not have to deal with a character like Poseidon. Maybe they weren't thinking about it potentially being picked, but it does kind of shut down a lot of what Horus wants to do. He has 2 dashes in his kit. Obviously, a cripple is going to be good at shutting that down, so I think that's an excellent last pick for Benny. That's why they hold him, because he does get potentially big counter last picks like this. So good pickup by Benny. I think that will probably shut down this Horus. But Horus has shown himself to be more of an alt bot, I would say. That's what Genetics has shown us. So I'm not sure if the Dragons are going to emulate that playstyle. It doesn't really seem like their playstyle to me. I more anticipate this Horus to be a pick that they're going to just kind of try to run it down, duo pressure, get the game going early, try to steal buffs often. And
Does that scream Mike to you?
that screams Mike to me.
You're right.
But when I think of the strengths of Horus lately, when I've seen Genetics succeeding on it, I see a lot more alt plays, a lot more macro play. The Dragons can play macro, but that's not where their strengths lie, Dolson. They want to get the game moving early. They want to get a lead. As much as they want to fight that identity, it is truly what they're the best at. So that's what I expect this Horus to be doing this game. I do think the Poseidon will be shutting that down, but we'll just have to see how the Dragons get rolling early on in these lanes.
I would toward the Valhalla Valkyries then. The game plan, the task you always set forth, and this could be Valkyries, any other team, to your point, is slowing down that early game control by the Jade Dragons. Do you think that the composition the Valkyries have laid out here has the ability to survive in the first 20 or so minutes of this game, or do you think could crumble under the amount of pressure that the Jade Dragons have?
I think there's a solid chance. Actually, we do see a little bit of crumbling depending on
Oh, no.
on how much
Not the crumble.
on how much that they actually kind of get rolling with the Dragons. I do think they win most of these lanes in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think the Valkyries kind of have to bide their time a little bit, wait till they hit their first item power spikes. Then a lot of these matchups will kind of flip on their head. Poseidon's going to get his Kraken. Mulan's going to get her first item so she can start to play that favorable matchup into the Hades.
Yep.
But pre-5, I think the Dragons win every lane. The Valkyries need to make sure they're securing their early buffs, not let it get out of control too fast, wait till their first item spikes, and then look to take fights when they're actually strong.
Well, that's exactly what happened against the Valkyries yesterday. All those early buffs ended up going by the wayside. Game number 2 between the Jade Dragons and the Valhalla Valkyries. It is J-Mac and Mystery Caster number 2.
Well, I wonder who that mystery caster number 2 is going to be to jump over here and oh, it's going to be you. Oh, you're the mystery caster joining me here. I got Dave coming from the desk onto the cast to help me out here because Lord knows I'm not going to be able to do this alone. I've got to have
J-Mac, you can do it
a hype
alone.
man jumping over here. Luckily,
You're a hype man.
I've got one of the best hype mans out there to help me out.
No. You're a hype man, J-Mac.
No, I'm a hype man.
doing my best. I'm doing my best Goremizer impression, and we all, if we could all just be Gore, you know what I mean? If we could
world
all
would be a
just be
better
Goremizer,
place.
it'd be a better place. Goremizer did a lot of cast desking a few weeks ago, and you know, I just wanted to be like him. Oh my God. You're right. That was not recent at all. That was not recent at all.
Time is a flat circle.
Time is a flat circle. It's all relative. Yeah, so I'll hop over here with you, J-Mac. We'll cast game number 2 of the Dragons and the Valhalla Valkyries. Now, the desk, a couple handsome gentlemen up there, really set the stage that early on in this game, feeling like the Jade Dragons should have some lane control here. I do want to highlight Mike invading this purple buff. Gets the littles. Will not get the full-on purple buff. It looked like, wow, he actually dropped a ward there, so this is known. So little XP going over to Mike and the full purple buff. Over to Panic Hat as well. And the Dragons have really loved that, starting off with Mike getting a little XP, giving all of the purple buff over to Panda Cat. But going back to what Hurrywin was talking about, I think pre-5 is where maybe the Jade Dragons can flex a bit and invade some of these buffs and make life difficult for the Valkyries in the early goings of this game.
And this is a very scary kind of pre-5 comp.
Wouldn't
Maybe
you
not even
guess
wait
it?
till pre-5. We can just go right now.
One auto, Scream's got it, and there's first blood. God, you guys, some of you guys are just so smart at SMITE. It just, like the third eye opens, and Hurrywin is just spot on it. J-Mac, you had some fantastic insight earlier on in our SEC matches, predicting things, and in game 1, you talk about how the Jade Dragons can just win in one random team fight. And now Hurrywin correct in that first blood over on the right side of the map, despite a good matchup for Aquarius. Scream right on it. And when Panda and Mike are jumping in, oh no, is he going to do it again?
Very well could. Sash is good. There's no beads by Aquarius, but there's not a lot of CC by a Hades and a Naja. Need a little bit more poke there. But, I mean, this is what Hurrywin was talking about, the pre-5 of this team being so scary. You look at a Hades. You get stuck inside of a wave against a Hades, you might as well just be having a death sentence at that point, but the Valkyrie's going to try and answer back to that pre-5.
This is going to be a 4-man rotation from the Valhalla Valkyries. Mike, yeah, sorry, friend, you're getting left by the wayside. That's an answer back from the Valkyries. Technically 2-man rotation for a 4-man collapse in. Does leave Panda Cat alone, though, for a bit of farm here in this lane. I'm sure Mike not super worried about dropping a kill there. And will wander on back to lane just fine. And in a moments like that, it's so hard to call, right? Because yes, you get the kill if you're the Valkyries, but you've spent the time of Kirmi, which that's the role of the jungler anyway, but you've also pulled Benny Q out of lane, who falls maybe about a half level behind. And the action continues. Over on right, FineOK takes a chunk of damage. Scream, brawling with a couple, and in goes FineOK, but the health bar's simply too low. Aquarius now just needs to hit one more stun, and it's in, and the Mulan feeling fine in the first few levels.
This is kind of what I was talking about with the Mulan, and you know, where FineOK was maybe joking about a potential Mulan ban is Mulan does a lot of damage early, has some decent CC with the grapple. It's almost on par with the Sash. In fact, I think it might be a little bit better than a Sash because it pulls them out of position as opposed to putting you out of position, kind of going a little bit deeper in there. Plus, to couple that up with the actual damage afterward between that first and second ability, Mulan has just such an immense amount of base damage early on. And again, if you're building this more damage style right out the gate, things like Soul Leader, Glad Shield that we see Aquarius at least hinting towards now, gives them a lot of extra burst and an immense amount of sustain to really match up against FineOK. So where the Jade Dragons have built a great pre-5 composition, now once 5 hits, Pagon's going to be a little bit weaker just because of the nature of how Yu Huang's scaling is. Great first 3 to 5. Not so great 5 to kind of 12 to 15. After that, Pagon will get a lot better. Scream pre-5 with him. Great at burning beads if Sash is available. Just in general, dangerous early comp from the Dragons, but the Valks have great answers back.
Mike is done for. A couple of deaths fall onto the Horus now. Scream considering a rotation in. But a great start for the dual lane of the Valhalla Valkyries. A couple of assists for Gamma, who gets a fantastic pull onto Polar Bear Mike. And then the knockdown from Wowie. And we haven't talked about Chiron much here, J-Mac. You know, not the ADC that is picked in every single game. You know, a couple of teams in the league still really value this pick. Netrioid on the Kings really comes to mind. But the ability to burst down from range later on. All that bluestone damage, all that ability damage. Pagon and Panda Cat with Centaurus potentially have a world of hurt coming their way. Same, maybe FineOK. Aquarius will ult away. Blue buff invade, dropped by the Jade Dragons. Not liking their chances.
No, not going to go for it there, especially with Kirmi standing by. PVM's only level 3 on the Horus compared to Gamma level 5. And I think Hurry made a great point on the desk, which was the Jade Dragons may have slipped by giving Gamma giving this god back over to Gamma.
The Atlas, yeah.
Not even gonna, you know, the 18 damage steal. That's something that's really hard to do. You can't really predict a steal like that. But just his overall performance on this god and the amount of pressure that he can provide in a lane. You drop that Astrolabe down, pull 2 people in towards it, or if even you can just get the gravity pull on just a single person regularly. It's a great way of burning beads away from people. It makes it so easy for Kirmi to be able to get these long-range initiations, to be able to find these picks that they need.
Scream wants to follow up, and he's got it. That is already a chunk of damage from Fine OK with that ultimate. I mean, got Aquarius down into execute threshold, basically. And the Mulan suffers again, now at 1 and 2. And, like, feels fine, maybe alone with just a Hades, but Scream has been very active on the right side of the map, covering up a potential lane weakness after level 5, where Mulan potentially gets a bit more comfortable. Wowie will avoid the stun now. Panda Cat just left alone to farm things up. And so Fine OK on this Hades again makes a big play. And I like what Hurrywin talks about on the desk with Dragons this phase have just felt different as far as setting up the meta. It feels like the Hades has been a big Jade Dragons call. The Naja has been a very popular Jade Dragons call as well. And being able to play around those picks, just so unique and something that's got to be so fun to watch for the Jade Dragons fans.
Naja is going to do really well for setting up for the comp, just because the amount of chase and the amount of range that they do have. Some good follow-up from Pregame. You drop a Dueling Dragons right after coming out of the sky, but Kraken avoided by Scream entirely.
What?
Gamma instead is the one who's turned on.
What happened?
You're me a little late to the rotation.
I didn't see much damage connect on the Scream. Maybe it was on the outer edge
Had to have been
there.
a sash to immune it.
Oh, good thought. Could have been a great play by Scream. He's alive, which is all you can certainly say. And Benny Q does not get the execute with the Kraken. Scream lives, and then what's worse is a kill onto Gamma after the fact. Always a potential for a tower dive when you got a Horus on your team, but Pagon uninterested. And watch his brother surf away at just about half HP. And this is when the Jade Dragons get threatening, right? When Mike on a mobile pick like Horus is able to go all over the place, play where he wants, invade the different buffs, make plays happen all over the map. When Mike and Scream can play in conjunction with one another early on, just such a threatening play style. Kirmi catches Panda Cat, stepping up. Root, yeah, speeds used. That'll be one dead Ho Yi. Eventually, please. It had to be the pullback from Gamma. Somebody kill Panda Cat. Thank you, Gamma. The one who grabs it, but it took far, far too long. Mike in to try to save his ADC. May cost him his life, and a double kill for the Atlas. And another swing for the Valhalla Valkyries.
You could see that Kirmi had the ultimate the entire time in that fight. Didn't want to use it to get the last hit to get the kill, so they were kind of just letting Gamma take his time. They were letting Gamma be able to just get that kill because the Suns, he was the closest one to the target there, so saying, all right, Gamma, go ahead, grab the kill. Problem is that Mike had rotated in, gets the heal, gets the shell, buys a little bit of extra time. Not quite enough, just because it's 3 versus 1, then 3 versus 2 in that case. They're still able to get it. But that kind of decision-making by the Valkyries in a late game could cost them, because that's when the Horus healing is going to be more valuable. The shell is going to get more value at that time. Lifesteal will be available to Panda Cat to be able to box during that. And with all those small little factors this early on, you can kind of get away with flubbing just a little bit. But once we get a little bit later in the game, the Valkyries have to make that full commit. Okay, Hoyi drops the Suns. I'm going to eat 1 extra Sun or 2 just to make sure we get this kill, no problem.
Yep.
Kirmi holding on to his ult the entire time during that one because he didn't want to use the ult for the initial or for the final hit of the kill. Wanted to maybe use it for the setup instead.
Lane is started to tilt away from Aquarius once again. Final K has felt just fine going in, ulting, forcing Aquarius back, using the Mulan ult defensively, and that means blue buff invade for the Jade Dragons, who are comfortably 1,000 gold ahead. Pagon avoids the pull-in by Gamma. Mike pulled back and then dashes away, so the 3v3 starting to build up over here in mid. Now, I wonder if the Jade Dragons end up tilting their play style a bit, because remember in Game 1, it was the early Gold Fury pull that got stolen away that really pumped the brakes on that Jade Dragons game in Game 1. Really dragged things out, even though it was a relatively fast finish anyway. You don't have the confirm from the E-set in the same way you did in Game 1, but you got the Ho Yi ultimate. Maybe we expect the Dragons to slow down a bit around these early objectives.
While they may not have the ultimate secure for the Jade Dragons, I think their burst damage and their abilities is going to be a little bit higher around the objectives. Pagon on this Yu Huang, once he gets his 3rd item in, the Staff of Mirrodin gets finished up, maybe a flat pen item or even a percent pen, will give him a ton of burst damage with a 2-1 combo. The only thing that's going to really be able to match it will be Benny Q with the Kraken on that opposite side. That's where they're really going to have to play their hand around this coin toss. And again, I mean, the Jade Dragons are willing to make those kinds of plays. They're willing to 50-50 the objectives, even if they're secure on the opposite side. So I think if they are going to pull objectives, their #1 plan should be to either zone out BennyQ, make sure that he can't get in to try and drop the Kraken, or to just find a pick onto BennyQ, and then it becomes a lot easier for the Jade Dragons to go for these objective plays.
Yeah, potential to pull, reset, force the Kraken. Because it depends, you know, around a Pyromancer, if you lose the Pyro, but suddenly the Kraken is not there to win you the team fight, you know, there's ways to bait things out of the Valhalla Valkyries. Benny hovering in mid. Pyromancer pulled back towards the Jade Dragon side of the jungle. This could be a simple Kraken, big damage from BennyQ. Drops the Whirlpool. Lots of damage out. The Jade Dragons get the Pyromancer anyway. That's got to not be a lot of damage from the Dragon. Scream sent back. Gamma bursted by Pregame. Up in the air is one. Down crashes Kiermi. And an ultimate from Fun. Okay, keeps Aquarius right in the fray, but look at all the CC onto the Mulan. My goodness, Aquarius has to ult away. Scream's got no more damage. I thought Ring Toss might have it, but no, it's fine. Okay, the Jade Dragons, with all the riches, get the Pyro +2.
The unfortunate part for Gamma is he made the right call, picking up Scream, picking up a squishy target, throwing him into 3. The problem is that Kiermi didn't realize and have the reaction time to stop the Windfire wheels that came immediately after. Scream gets thrown back and immediately pivot 90-degree over towards Kiermi, throws him up in the sky, and now suddenly the Valkyries are down a player. Sure, the Dragons are down one because their jungler's out, but Final K is already channeling a Pillar of Agony, has Aquarius stuck inside, already zoning people out. Gamma can't really go anywhere in that regard. And so once Kiermi lands, Pagon's already ready for the setup, can find that easy pick right after. Again, Final K locking Aquarius down, which I'm not sure why he's stuck around so long in Pillar of Agony. Typically, the answer has been, if Final K ults, Aqua ults immediately after. That gets them away and is able to get back to safety. But because he's stuck around, then ate the full duration of ring bounce on a wave.
That was close.
Made it to where it was even harder, at least for the Valkyries, to try and fight back in there.
I thought Mike might have had, well, it's the last 10 damage from Sands of Time that confirms it, but obviously the Valhalla Valkyries feeling comfortable in that. I thought Mike had a fighter's chance in stealing that one away with the timing of that ranged auto attack. That's a good pullback by the Valhalla Valkyries. I would argue necessary. If the Jade Dragons get both the fight and the Pyro and then rotate over and pull the Gold Fury as well and get that, this game's starting to get a little bit out of control against the Valks. So with the Kraken back up, could consider making some plays. And we haven't talked much about the combination potential, right? I mean, you talk about Naja dropping that down into some damage. You got it with Pregame, Final K potentially, Panda Cat with the Suns as well. Aquarius will ult away. Tower's been dealt with. Aquarius has got to die here. Mike just to cover the escape. Some good sustain will delay this out, but that's just a nice rotation by the Jade Dragons. And look at the map. Valhalla Valkyries all returning from base. Unable to put pressure elsewhere on the map.
A lot of Mulan's safety in solo lane, or safety in general,
1
just
and
comes
4.
from her ultimate, being able to get that long range dash, maybe turn around, get the knock up, and then cancel the final shot because you don't really get a whole lot of damage from the arrow shot itself. So using that dash to get away from things, get out of Pillar of Agony from Final K, get away from Scream and PBM. The problem is in that case, Aqua used it and slammed headfirst into a wall, so he's not going anywhere. Then there's 4 people around, kind of just unfortunate for him that there's so many rotations there. But this is how you punish the Mulan. Bait out that ultimate as early as you can in a team fight. Then she has no way of getting out of all of this AoE CC, out of all of the general CC that the Jade Dragons have. And then she just becomes a sitting duck and has to play around her sustain instead.
Yeah, I think today has been the day of Caster's curses, because think about going into this set, J-Mac. You and I talked about, my goodness, you're right. We're only 1 set in. We got the Titans versus the Kings coming up next. That's going to be a barn burner. We set up this set talking about the solo lane matchup, Final K versus Aquarius, and a lot of what we talked about with Aquarius is, you know, might not always win you the game, but he won't lose you the game. And I am certainly not putting this at the feet of Aquarius, because he has just been chosen to die by the Jade Dragons this game. And sometimes you just can't do anything about it. Scream has been over there. Final K has been setting up wonderfully. That's a 4-man rotation by the Dragons. It is what it is for Aquarius this game. But at 1 and 4, Aquarius has been the target. They've kept this Mulan behind, now 2 levels down. And it's the opposite of game timing from what Aquarius wants to be able to get nice and active. I think this next Pyromancer could be interesting in about a minute's time. If the Valks feel comfortable enough, 3,000 gold down. or if Panda Cat overextends. I'm not sure he spotted Gamma, though Mike is here, baiting out as well. Could get a really nice 2v2, but lackluster at best, as no gank will come out. And you might notice Spear of the Magus picked up by Gamma this time instead of Divine Ruin, so still a little damage early in this Atlas build.
I think I would have rather it been Divine, but a fight brawling out over at the Gold Fury will peter for a moment.
Looks like Jade Dragons, though, still comfortable. Taking a step forward. No, they won't look for the fight, but do push back the Valhalla Valkyries. The sash always gets the brain going because it's just such a heavy initiation style ability. You're like, all right, we're going in, we're doing it now. But Scream backs away just a little bit. Have not been much shifts in the damage chart throughout this game. You'd imagine a Mulan would be in a very strong point, and that's exactly where Aquarius is, but all the rest of it for the Jade Dragons. We go into this next Pyromancer, J-Mac, 16.5 minutes. Jade Dragons comfortably in the lead of this game. You think the Valhalla Valkyries can step up?
If Kirmi can find somebody with his ultimate, because I can't recall a good
No, we have
ultimate
not
that
seen
Kirmi
one
has
yet.
thrown so far. I mean, held onto it on the double kill on the left side. Hasn't really gotten value from it here.
Fino.
If Kirmi can find somebody with it, it could be big.
Oh my god, wow, he had to use the beads and lost half of his HP, but that's good by Aquarius. Pyromancer goes to the Valkyries. Oh,
There's
that's
an ult.
big initiation onto the Jade Dragons. Aquarius has done everything, but the kills do not follow. Beads in sync, off 3. Aegis there as well. That is a miraculous Kraken by Benny Q, but only gets the actives. It's a 1-for-1, but the Pyromancer taken by the Valkyries. You could call that a win for the Valks.
This is where being a Mulan can shine. Right in the middle of that fight, finds 4 people, gets the knockup, and it forces beads out of everybody else. A
Look at
crack
the
up to
beads
follow
timers.
immediately.
The beads and the Aegis.
Literally everybody that he had caught during that one. I mean, Final K dashes out, and it's an immediate chase in by Aquarius, but this is the downside of being so far behind for Aquarius is that's a hero play. That is a milestone play. If Aquarius is even or even slightly ahead, that fight goes drastically in favor of the Valkyries. That's maybe even 1 or 2 more kills there, but because he's been bullied so much, because he's been put so far behind, he doesn't have the damage, and he doesn't have the defense to live through the amount of people that he just ran at.
Oh my god, goodbye Polar Bear Mike. And now if the Jade Dragons, okay, they won't. I was going to say, if they want to compete for this Oni Fury, you're going to have to do it without Mike, though fine, okay. I mean, look, every Hades sees grouped up members, and they want to fight. Fine, okay, pulls in a couple with his ultimate, and the Valkyries are so low. The Jade Dragons, they have 1 less team member, but the health advantage, not even close. Fine, okay, gets the job done on the back, and a 2-kill swing for the Jade Dragons despite losing the Fury.
Another beads pull. Now Benny Q's not going to have it. Final K making a perfect wrap around to the backside of that fight, and you called it a dream image, at least for a Hades. You see 5 people standing in a small little circle. Only catches a couple with Pillar of Agony after, with how slow he was kind of to getting into that fight. The Valkyries had enough time to start separating themselves, really only forced Benny Q to have to use his beads to get away from it. Everybody else able to either ult out, jump out, dash out, whatever it may be. But the Valkyries still playing proactively, still, even despite the fact that they're 3,000 to 4,000 gold down, they're still trying to make these plays. And this is what the Valkyries are good at. They're good at still scrapping no matter what. And this comes from their time in the SCC, which was, we're just going to fight you.
That's all it is,
We just want to play.
yeah.
I mean, you think of the SCC, and we kind of joke about it sometimes, but in other moments, it kind of does feel like we're watching Arena on the Conquest map because of how much these guys want to fight. And that's where the Valkyries and some of those teams have that experience is, it doesn't matter if we're down 5,000 gold. We just want to fight you. We're going to pick a fight, whether we win or lose. Unfortunately, sometimes when you're this far down, you're probably going to end up losing more often than not. But finding one little pick here and there, Gamma being able to pick up PBM and kind of give at least a man advantage at the Fury, made it not go disastrously for the Valkyries.
Well, the last 5 seconds of satisfying on the beads timers. Fine, okay, Pagon, Panda finally get their beads back. Aegis for Pagon and Panda Cat come up at the exact same time. That, the final remnants of the massive Kraken by Benny Q that got beads and Aegis. And I think that's got to actually be a bit more salt in the woundy type vibe for the Valkyries, where Benny Q gets beads and Aegis in sync off 3 members of the Jade Dragons, and you still handedly lose the fight around the Oni Fury just a few minutes later. There's something to be said for getting the objective where yesterday they had such a hard time against the Oni Warriors, the Valkyries did, locking down those objectives. Now you're getting the objectives but losing the kills. It's about putting all of it together. So Trebuchet makes its way down the left side of the map with a decent-sized minion wave. So that tier 2 tower under threat. And it looks like, at least for the red buff, Benny will shift left here. I don't know if he'll fully commit in clearing out that left side wave. I was going to say, he had speed buff for a second. I was waiting for that to wear off and able to go back and pick up his red buff. Wondering if the Jade Dragons, they play so unhinged in the best way possible sometimes that I was half expecting just an immediate FG pull. But it looks like at least one more time this game, J-Mac, we are going to get the 5v5. Keep your eyes on Benny in that Kraken.
Benny Q's going to be the main factor for the Valkyries to steal this one away. Gamma also with that ultimate could play a factor, especially up against Fine OK. If he goes up into that Pillar of Agony a little too early, he gets a lot of protections, but then Gamma can strip a lot of those away with his own ultimate. So, would be an ideal target to drop that one on top of, same with PBM.
Wow.
But if Aquarius can't even get into the fight himself, he's level 16 right now on this Mulan against level 19 on the opposite side for his solo. Aquarius doesn't have the health of the defenses to really stay in this fight.
Well, a slow burn left side, tier 2. Will die. What has happened? Final K has simply looked at Gamma and said, you're not allowed to play. We'll talk about his build in just a moment because it's happened again. The Dragons simply dive forth, and 2 members of the Valkyries are gone. Max range sash, say that 5 times fast, connects by Scream, and a double kill for the Naja. And unfortunately, J-Mac, barring a comeback, we have seen this story before. The Jade Dragons, when they start playing with momentum, near unbeatable. The tier 2 finally dies on left. The Trebuchet did all of it. The Jade Dragons team fight just so well, and the Valhalla Valkyries wiped from the map.
And again, it comes down to Gamma's build, going this Gauntlet of Thieves, getting the flat pen after. Great. Staff of Mirrodin, it's not giving you any defenses to your name. It's giving you more power when you drop the ult, but by the time Gamma had dropped the ult, he was already dead, and you were sitting there staring at the Gamma Ray on the ground, just waiting to be fired away. So Gamma got no value in that fight. Final K and Scream make it to the back line so easily because of it. In fact, Scream had gone and picked Kirmi by himself. Didn't quite get the kill, needed a little bit of follow-up after, but I mean, this is the downside of when you build so much damage on your support.
And you know what's tough is then your solo tank, and it's sort of hybrid by Aquarius, not even full-on tank on the Mulan. You know, a lot of the downfall with Mulan is some of those abilities self-root. So it feels like the one then the one somewhat tanky member of your team is a character that's somewhat susceptible to just being dove on, whether it's the ultimate not connecting or rooting in place when you're looking for the stun, things like that. And so the tankiness just hasn't quite come together for the Valhalla Valkyries here in this game, and Jade Dragon's able to punish it. I mean, Final K is 506. Walked back, pressed ult on Gamma, and killed him. There's a little damage elsewhere, of course, but Final K has just done so much. 5-2 and 5 from Scream. That right side of the map between jungle and solo lane has just been a bloodbath for the Jade Dragons. And at 24 minutes and all of the time to go on this Fire Giant, look at the map. No more towers remaining. You've got every ounce of this Fire Giant buff to walk in, siege up a Phoenix. And if it's the Jade Dragons we know, maybe a blink in from Fine OK and a game-ending team fight.
They need to get a set of beads off of somebody for the Valkyries. Valkyries have got to take either Pagon's beads or Panda Cats, even Fine OK's, because the problem that we're still having is that I have yet to see a single Huntress of Bast pull somebody back into a fight. Kirmi has not been able to find any value on this Bast, and he might not get to find it in this fight either.
I like the mindset from Fine OK. Blinks in, forces the Valkyries back, but doesn't see the Pillar of Agony that he likes. Centaurus gets used. You're right, Pagon had to use the beads, but and I will say Pagon had to use the beads. That's a net win for the Valkyries. I will add the caveat that it's a Yu Huang who can flutter away, and so there's still some safety into that kit anyway, but you still got the beads. That's what matters. Fine OK, he's had to use the beads as well. Kirmi's ultimate has a couple fine targets now to make the difference.
Now two beads stripped away from the Jade Dragons. Kirmi.
That is the question.
Has got.
Appreciate you. I'm on it today.
No, you got it.
Just wait.
You're
just
nailing
wait.
it. You're nailing it. We're just getting started today,
just
baby.
Wait.
We're just getting started. PBM, though, could be dragging a wave. This is something that Genetics did all the time on E United, and they'll drag that wave over to mid. There's a little bit of answer over to him, but he didn't make it all the way in.
Only two took the train. Only two got on the caboose. But is Scream worried about it? No, because in the back, Scream is running things anyway. It's an intentional split by the Jade Dragons. Mike is the sacrifice. In the right, or the left side, Phoenix rather, is the one that dies. Maybe Scream was in there as well. In all of the chaos, maybe Scream had made it in, but looked to me like only FineOK and Mike were up front there, but it worked out. And all of the sustain for the Dragons keeps them healthy. 4 versus 3 under the mid lane Phoenix.
Gotta find something for Kierme. No ult though. Wowie's already basically dead. Scream pulled back, and maybe at least one for the Valkyries.
Yeah, and that's big Centaurus from Wowie. Mid lane Phoenix now gone. We can take a deep breath for just a moment because the Jade Dragons have the damage but not the health bars to finish off this game. Little chaotic. We got a sprinkle of chaos there under the left and mid Phoenix, but the Jade Dragons happy with what they're coming away with. 15 seconds left on the Fire Giant buff. That'll drop off. We'll re-find our footing, and we'll head back over to the FG. Full build now on Scream, and Scream ended up going double stacking. That's a late Transcendence. Was able to get it stacked up in plenty of time. I don't know, J-Mac. The Valks have just not had an answer to this Hades. It feels like the sustain is so heavy. I mean, there's decent amounts of anti-heal, I suppose, but there's also a Naja and a Horus. I'm surprised that we didn't get another Divine Ruin from Gamma at some point. I don't know. Plenty of conversations, I think, to be had, but wow, he also has a Brawlers. It's just been very difficult, despite the builds maybe, because there is some anti-heal and killing off any of these Jade Dragons team members.
It's just been a case of the Valkyries just can't get their damage off properly in a fight between Beads and Aegis. Not many opportunities for Benny Q to get a really good Kraken on somebody. Pagon being on this Yu Huang also makes it immensely difficult to do so. Just one of the better mages in the game of kind of denying damage to people. Between the flight, if he can catch it fast enough, will avoid the Kraken. If he pops the Dueling Dragons, can avoid at least the knock-up from there that would set up from even more damage beyond there, because Aquarius had been picked on so many times in the early stages of the game. He's still not quite finished up with his build yet. He doesn't have the tankiness to stay in these fights. Gamma's not tanky enough to stay in these fights. So right now the Valkyries are kind of just depending on this guerrilla warfare style of play to try and find new picks, but they can't even grab that, and PBM is setting up with the rest of his team to just take the right Phoenix for free.
That's called maximizing your time. Mike says, I don't need this Horus ult for anything else. I just need it to move my team to the right side of the map. What could be the final Phoenix siege of the game. Frenzy gets used. Mike will dash away, and wouldn't you guess it, FineOK is chunked down Kierme's entire health bar, but FineOK is low as well. No chance the Hades lives. This is the best defense we've seen from the Valhalla Valkyries so far. All 5 members of both teams remain on the map.
Might have been the worst person that Kierme could have pulled with that ultimate, ended up grabbing PBM, who has 2 different dashes to be able to get him back out, had the healing dash
but it's a pull
to make sure they could go through, but he did get a pull. And that is what we've been asking out of Kierme this game, is to find somebody with the ult, get a set of beads away, get an Aegis torn out there, but it might not be enough because now there's nothing for this Phoenix defense.
Phoenix hitting hard onto Scream, not the one who wants to be tanking up the bird. Fire minions make their way into the Titan room. That could be the differential now. My goodness, Aquarius simply not tanky enough. Kierme jumps back forward and back out, but FineOK puts him in the dirt. Gamma, a double pull, a quad pull, if you will. And I will. But the Valhalla Valkyries won't come back into this fight. The Jade Dragons have all 5, and they've got enough leg, they got enough damage, and I think enough gold to just wait on a fire minion wave and close the book here on game 2.
Got 2 fire minion waves. Gamma and Benny are about to get ults back up. If Benny can find one good Kraken during this, it would potentially save the game. The problem is there's still 3 sets of Aegis up.
Need the Kraken, need some time. Kraken hits FineOK, doesn't do anything. It is simply better by the Jade Dragons in this game. The Valhalla Valkyries, not much to take away, and the Dragons grab themselves the 2-0.
A lot of this game just came down to a lack of pressure on beads across the board. Kierme's never able to pull anybody except till the very end of the game with Huntress of Bast, so this Bastet doesn't get the main benefit that Bastet has ever since her rework, which is being able to reposition one person in a team fight. Find one person, isolate them from the rest, pull them out of position. Aquarius, because he never got to get the ball rolling in his lane because he was starting out the game 1-4, 1-5. At one point, he's 4 levels behind FinoK and a full item plus beyond there. So he doesn't have the tankiness. So his primary initiation, which is to grapple somebody, bring himself closer to the enemy team, or jump in with his ultimate and get in the middle of a team. He doesn't have the tankiness to be able to survive the onslaught of damage. He doesn't have the real benefits that are kind of going over there. I'm going to go ahead and let Dulcin make his way back over to the desk because I know you got to make your little crawl back over there, but no, please don't crawl. I don't think, if you want to crawl, I won't make you do so, but yeah, I'll give this one back over to Dulcin and Hurry when they can do a little bit better to break that one down on the desk for me.
What a crazy game.
Crawl back to the desk, Curry?
I think a lot of people would have liked to see that.
Did you see the whack? I bonked the camera. We're not doing that here.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. I think it's for the best that we don't entice that kind of behavior.
No, we would never. Not around here. The Jade Dragons enticing, though, to their fans because this one, difficult to watch probably for the Valkyries fans on the other side. Game 1 felt a bit more back and forth, but Game 2 heavily in control of the Jade Dragons. I think early on, Hurry, there are some moments where maybe Mike a bit caught out. You're defending some of your lanes relatively well. But ultimately, to your point, I think just too much pressure on the map from the Dragons.
A good punch back, I think, by the Valkyries on the duo side of the map, finding some kills on PBM over there early. I think that was pretty necessary for this team. Ultimately, I do think that death from Aquarius kind of was pretty telling to what the rest of the game is going to be like, unfortunately, for the Valkyries. FinoK just having too much pressure, too much rotation priority, kind of even invading blues by himself. Kind of set the tone for this game, I think, towards the later half. Unfortunately, the Valks weren't able to come back. They did have a good fight back. Excellent crack in there.
Yeah.
3 beads. He wasn't lying about the beads thing. He says he gets the most beads out of any mid laner.
Might be true.
I just watched him get 3, so it definitely...
And 2 Aegises in that as well.
I mean, just keep adding it up. I mean, I would say overall, you know, some good gameplay. The Valkyries definitely fought back. They definitely found themselves a lot of kills. Unfortunately, couldn't find any major objectives. Unfortunately, couldn't get the ball rolling when it came to the big objectives like Fire Giant, and ultimately fell here.
Yeah, look, it was a really nice game from Scream. The sashes were hitting. I will give Kierme some credit. We saw a pull onto Panda Cat in one of the highlights just a few moments ago, but ultimately, I assume Beads just too strong from Panda to fully get pulled back into the Valhalla Valkyries team comp. You know, it's not often. Actually, we have not seen Aquarius get like isolated like that in a little while. If I'm looking back at Aquarius's games, it's a lot of like very close KDAs. You're hovering really close to a 1 KDA, a little bit over, potentially closer to a 2 with a lot of assists, things like that. This seemed like a real concerted effort by the Jade Dragons early to put pressure onto Aquarius and put this Mulan in a really difficult position. I think there's a conversation to be had, though, Hurry. We've talked a lot about Gamma and the style of build on this Atlas. Because, ultimately, again, it's Thebes, Sentinels, and Brace that's providing the protections. And then you go Magus into Mirrodin. And so you're getting, this big damage burst. And then on the other side, you're hoping that this sort of hybrid tank Mulan is tanky enough. In your mind, would you have liked to see a different solo laner if you're going to build that type of build on Atlas? Or do you want to see full tank on Atlas? What's your take on the damagey Atlas mindset here?
I'll give you my analysis,
please do.
And then I'm going to give you my opinion.
Yeah, please.
My analysis is that he wants that endurance patch, Thebes, plus the Thebes to carry him throughout the early game. He's still going to be really hard to kill. And then he kind of wants to transition into like a more hybrid frontliner.
Right.
Similar to, as you said, a soul laner would typically go. My opinion of it is it kind of sells out your other frontliner a little bit. You're not tanky enough to check corners, especially from the back foot. If you're forced to go beads in games you might not normally have to go beads, as we see that Gamma usually has to go towards, so he's losing a team fight relic. So I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think the mindset is there. It makes sense. But in games like this, especially when his soul laner's behind, they don't really have anyone to play that role of frontline. And I think that does kind of create an issue. It's fun to watch. He does get objective steals with it, and it does work from time to time. So it's an interesting strategy. I like to see, that he has his own identity. He should probably work on it a little bit. Workshop it a little bit more and get back to us. It's close.
Well, in game 1, it was a little bit more tanky, so there's some flexibility there, but with a Mulan who can be punished. Difficult maybe for the front line here in game 2 for the Valhalla Valkyries. That's our first game of SPL Saturday in the books, and it's the Jade Dragons taking it to 0. But don't you worry, we've got a whole nother set of SPL just around the corner. It's been a weekend of 2-0s, but the Tartarus Titans and the Camelot Kings could provide us our first 3-game set of the weekend. The Jade Dragons back in action tomorrow against the Olympus Bolts, who are trying to find their footing after a very difficult week last week. Oni Warriors, who look great, Solar Scarabs, also trying to bounce back after a difficult week. And then we end our weekend with Leviathans versus Camelot Kings. That's a really good one. And so, Hurryland, Titans versus Kings. This is a 3v3 versus 5 matchup. Kings a chance to tie the Jade Dragons atop the leaderboards here with a win. Do you think this one has potential to be our first 3-game set of the weekend?
I think it's very possible. The Titans, they're 2-2, so and I consider them typically to be a top team. They have been all year. They're falling down in the standings. They can't afford a loss right now if they want to compete for that first seed, which I know that they're always competing for. So I imagine they're going to be fighting out there hard today. And the Kings always, tighten themselves.
Tighten themselves up? Are they allowed to?
Well, they're like a Titan themselves,
Oh,
They're
they're a Titan
strong
themselves.
team.
Got it. 2 Titans battling it out in our second set of the day. Camelot Kings, Tartarus Titans coming up next.